welcome finally to the Monday Live. I can see now that we are 9 minutes late because we forgot to push the broadcast button. You missed some really good stuff, frankly. Maybe we'll go back to it. Maybe we won't. I mean, just this is the way it works. We had Greg Sankey take the stage today. Greg gave about a 30-minute presentation, a little preamble to media days that are going on right now at the Omni Hotel in Dallas, Texas. He covered a lot of subjects. He talked about the SEC's preference of Apple products over Android, the need for a federal intervention to unify some NIL standards across all states. There are currently 30 different laws, 30 different states. It's a hot mess. Greg even called real estate agents the leaders of tomorrow, which includes our own Laura Baker, which we'll get to a little bit later. He gave a subtle, if not pointed, slight to the other conferences, stating that with our expansion, with the SEC's expansion, they still stayed within a geographically consistent area, adding only about 100 miles to the furthest commute between schools. And he also talked about the place sport plays in American culture. And one of the beauties of Inside Texas is the community aspect. Members come from different experiences, knowledge bases, sensibilities, points of view, and there are disagreements. It's a message board. There are always disagreements. But those disagreements stem from a common love of the University of Texas, and we would love for you to join us there. If you use the promo code IT1, you will get 2 months of Inside Texas, which will get you into the season. So please join us there. And joining us today, I've got Eric. I've got our very own Paul, our very own Eric, and here at the live here, we've got our Ian Boyd. Hello, Ian. How you doing? I can see that you are getting your journalistic swerve on at Media Days. You got to hear Sankey this morning. What were some of your takeaways?
Well, LC, I'm here live at the Omnium Hotel, and Greg Sankey had a pretty long presentation. The major thing of substance, I would say, would be his insistence early in his speech that the SEC is 16 teams strong, indicating that they are not interested in adding additional teams. And then because subtext is difficult, he was asked repeatedly during the press conference if it was possible that the SEC might add more teams like Clemson and Florida State. And he would just say, I'm not involved in recruiting schools, and we're very happy at 16, and we are strong where we're at. Although he did have a comment about having contiguous states attached to the league. So I'd say there's potentially a door open there. And I think that'll be the interesting thing to see in the coming weeks is whether the Clemson, Florida State brouhaha with the ACC materializes into something with the SEC or not, but he's definitely was not at all interested in talking about it right now. And then, they use Apple products on the sideline. Hooray for the SEC. It's actually a regionally consistent conference. Some spiking of the football.
Some spiking of the football. We have so again, I want to go back a little bit and talk to you, Paul, just to get you in here. You've got your forthcoming prospectus on how the SEC is going to look this year. And every now and again, we like to check in on with you and not only see how that's going. I know that is a massive undertaking for you, but with these particular games that we've got coming up, with these particular matchups that we've got coming up, and obviously today was all about Brian Kelly, and we'll talk about him here in a little bit, but what is it specifically about LSU? And I know that they're not on our schedule, but what is it specifically about LSU that Brian Kelly, if you were Brian Kelly, what would you really want the crowd to know, the media to know about your program?
That's an interesting question. First, let me a quick comment on the 16 strong thing. I actually think the two words there were communicating two different things. The 16 was about Florida State and Clemson. The strong part was actually a shot at the ACC. And that's why he's talking about the contiguous schools and the quality of schools brought on. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma were the two prizes of realignment in that order. And securing the state of Texas, and Texas and Texas A&M completely secure the state of Texas for the SEC. That's the biggest demographic get of anything, because it's the second most populous state, but it's one with fervor, right? So, California's got a lot of people, but no one is necessarily that excited about football, and that's reflected in the rankings. So, and the ratings. So, I think that's the reference too. Is when you have the ACC adding Cal, Stanford, and SMU, the SEC is sort of rolling their eyes, saying, what did you really do? But yeah, as far as LSU, I think Brian Kelly wants everyone to know that he's going to try to field a defense this year. I think that he will be unsuccessful in fielding a defense. I think it'll be improved, but if you look at advanced metrics, they were the 102nd ranked defense in college football last year. And if you watch them, it actually didn't even feel that good, to be honest. They had real struggles in their secondary. They had zeros at corner. They had terrible defensive line plays, specifically in defensive tackle. They weren't well coached. So they brought on Blake Baker, who was the defensive coordinator at Missouri. And he's a guy that's pretty respected. I think he's going to turn it around. But right now, I don't know that they have the Jimmies and Joes. I know they got Harold Perkins. I struggle to name a guy on their roster who's anything better than above average in terms of defense right now. So it is LSU. I mean, they're freaking located in Louisiana. They're a stone's throw from East Texas. They can access Georgia and Florida. They can correct and address their talent deficits on defense quickly. And they may already have the guys who are just freshmen and sophomores. But ultimately, I think Brian Kelly's message is that we're going to try to play some defense at some point.
Well, you got to hear Brian today, Ian. What were some of your takeaways? Was he able to accomplish creating some confidence in his defense?
Well, the more you have to talk about something, the less confidence you inspire, I think. Our own Joe Cook tried to ask him a question that was basically something along the lines of, do you have any advice for Texas and Oklahoma on how to win 10 games and make a splash in your first year in the SEC? But Joe didn't put it explicitly enough. And so Brian Kelly just took the opportunity to talk about how LSU needs to improve on defense this year. He also was asked about replacing his NFL wide receivers. And he gave one of those answers where he said we have 6 or 8 good receivers on campus, which means it might be a little dicey. He was asked about poaching Bo Davis and how that was accomplished. And he talked about the importance of building a strong defensive line at LSU. And he was asked about how to use Harold Perkins, which the answer is obviously inside linebacker. And the difficulty is obviously that inside linebacker is a very difficult position to learn to play. Everybody knows this kid is really talented, but it's really hard to translate that. I mean, he's like, we all remember with Malik Jefferson, or some of the other talented outside linebackers Texas has recruited in the past that had to learn to play inside and read and understand things that they'd never had to do in high school and how long that can take to really take hold. So he projected accountability and an understanding of the expectations for LSU this season, but I don't know that he's really built confidence. And I have not yet seen Perkins here, but when Kelly said, when we see him, we'll see that he's significantly larger than he's been in the past. I haven't seen him in person before. I don't have anything to compare him to, but I'll let you guys know if he looks like a linebacker or not.
Now, he does have a breakout session later on today. You're planning on hitting up?
I might as well, yeah.
What is there anything in particular you would want to know from him? Anything that you'd like to hear? Presumably, you want to know whether he's training at middle linebacker. What are you thinking that you would like to get out of a Harold Perkins breakout session?
It'd be interesting if I could get him to. I had this great interaction with Kenneth Murray, the Oklahoma linebacker, one year where I asked him questions about how Oklahoma defended a specific play, and he gave this long, very interesting answer about this run play that Oklahoma had routinely failed to stop. And the takeaway from some of his quotes seemed to basically be that they didn't even seem to really have a plan on defense or what they were doing. Or if they did, it was not something that was clearly understood by their players. So if I ask him a good detailed question and we get an answer like that, then that'll probably be pretty telling about where he stands at his position at LSU right now.
We have Eric, we're going to switch over to you for a second. We have a potential commitment. We have an announcement, I should think it's fair to say, later today with our our tight end potential, maybe even outside linebacker Townsend. What can you tell us a little bit about him? I know you're a big fan of this kid. What if Texas were to get him? What would they get in a player like Townsend?
Yeah, Nick Townsend, spring to Caney, 6'3.5", 235 pounds, ran 10.92 in the 100 this year. So, he's big and athletic. He's an animal on the field. He can play either side of the ball. He's going to play tight end at Texas. Just love the football character. The coaches rave about him. I've seen him numerous times, seen him at practice. He practices hard. He just gets after it on the field, man. He loves football. He's a football guy. When I talk to his coaches, they say one thing they liked about Texas was that they presented a fail-safe for him if tight end didn't work out. They just switch him over to defense, and he's open to that. Obviously, tight end's going to be number one, and I can't see any possible way that tight end doesn't work out. I think he's a more talented tight end prospect than Ja'Tavion Sanders. So I'm pretty bullish on him becoming an NFL player long term. So if they can get him, it'll be Jeff Banks' biggest tight end get since he's been at Texas. I think he's a top 50 player. I think he's actually ranked in the round 120. I think that's off quite a bit. But I've got some familiarity bias in my favor. I know the kid kind of pretty well. So it'd be a monstrous kid. He'd probably be my second favorite commit in the class behind Lance Jackson if they can get him.
One of the things I know that you've highlighted and pointed to is his work ethic, specifically the way that he likes to be coached. Can you expand on that a little bit? Yeah,
every time I've talked to him, he said one of the things he's looking for in a school is to be coached hard every time without fail. When I talked to him in January, when I talked to him early in the spring, later in the spring, he's looking to be coached hard. And I think if he picks Texas, he knows that Jeff Banks is going to bring that to him. Jeff Banks, highly energetic guy. He's it's constructive criticism with Jeff, but he's on these guys pretty good. They love him for it though. I think it's a match made in heaven if he picks Texas.
It's my understanding we may even have another announcement today. Is that correct?
Well, his teammate Tino Kynes, wide receiver, another really good track athlete, ran 10.4 this year, ran 20.7 in the 200, which is actually absolutely cooking. I think he's going to pick USC today. Texas has made a late charge after some misses of late. I think Texas will probably stay on him and maybe try to flip him down the road, but I expect him to pick Lincoln Riley in that offense today.
That's great. Now, so Paul, I think one question I might have for you with all of this is looking at, the tight end position and how important it is, certainly in Sark's offense. What if you were to, and we're talking again about a player like Townsend, what would your prototypical ideal Steve Sarkisian tight end look like?
Let's just take 3 or 4 Rob Gronkowskis and call it a day.
Okay,
we'll be good to go. I mean, it's probably the least talented position on the Texas roster globally. It's got the most developmental guys. It's got the guys who probably are the least proven if you look at the totality of the position group. And I think that they recognize that they need to upgrade the pure talent. And they did that last year. We've heard good things about Washington. And I think, Ian, you said in the roster update, he's like 250 now.
Washington is now on the roster at 250. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's huge. Hey, I don't know if you guys know this, but if you're like a 6'4", 6'5" dude and skinny in high school, you can lift weights and eat food and you'll put on weight.
It's a pretty common trait. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he was 205 and everyone was like, is he going to play slot receiver?
Yeah.
No, he's going to play tight end because he's going to eat food and lift weights. That's how it goes. So, yeah, I think Texas understands they need to upgrade the raw talent level of that room. And if you can do Washington, Townsend back to back, that's a great step in that direction.
Ian, we're probably not going to talk to you before Wednesday. This is when Texas takes to the stage. So this might be an opportunity now. What specifically are you looking for? And are there players, any breakout sessions with the Texas side that you're really looking forward to chatting to? Did we freeze your delay? With Ian, it's so hard to tell whether he's thinking or he's legitimately frozen.
I think he's staring you down. I think he's pissed. Put your sunglasses back on, Ian.
We've lost. All right, we've lost the plot with Ian. And again, it's probably because it's lunchtime down at the Omni Hotel.
I'm not getting much here. Sorry.
Oh, it's quite all right. It is quite all right. So with the well, with that, I think I can open that question up to both you and both Eric and Paul here. I mean, what would, and we've talked about this, please check out InsideTexas.com. There's been some really great articles on media days, what some of the expectations are moving forward. But just in a general sense, I would say, Eric, what do you want to hear from the representatives from Texas that are going to get you excited or positive, rather, moving into the season?
Kelvin Banks hasn't been presented to the media a ton in his career. I'm curious to see what he just thinks about the offensive line replacing Christian Jones at right tackle, how he feels about Cam Williams, run blocking, how he feels for playing next to Hayden Connor. I'd love to just get his global thoughts on the offensive line. He's a quiet guy, but he's insightful, very mature. Definitely going to be a good interview. I'm just curious what he has to say. Again, he hasn't talked to the media a ton in his career. He's just now becoming a junior.
Anything for you, Paul? Anything particular that you're looking forward to?
About SEC Media Days?
Well, no, specifically Texas. I mean, messaging, I think messaging gets overplayed, obviously, a lot. These coaches are here to give a specific message. They're trying. It's a lot of coach speak. But is there one thing that if you were to hear or look out for, that you would be really positive moving into the season?
I want to know about Cam Williams at right tackle. And I want to know about their appraisal of the secondary, how they're coming together. I think there's been a lot of talk about the defensive tackle room, and that's great, understandably. We just lost the best defensive tackle combo in college football. But we're not writing enough about the defensive backs and the secondary, because when we played higher grade quarterbacks, that was the group that really got exposed. And not just from an individual talent level or individual position coaching level, but also schematically. We didn't have stuff married up very well. And you could say Michael Penix is awesome and all that stuff, but you saw a real contrast in game plan and position coaching and ability when you watch Texas play Washington and when you watch Washington play Michigan. So we want to aspire to be Michigan in respect to that. And in the offseason, frankly, they did a big house cleaning. I think by my count, 8 different Texas defensive backs portaled out at varying times. And some of those were mutual. Some of those maybe were Texas telling them that they didn't have necessarily a future here. And I think they're trying to upgrade athleticism, but I also think they're trying to upgrade football IQ back there quite a bit.
There have not been a ton of busts in 7-on-7. I've heard. So they're playing a very good wide receiver group pretty evenly from sources behind the scenes on that one. But obviously, again, we'll learn a lot more in August to how they're faring when you got to account for all 11 offensive players.
It is I mean, we do, as you're right, we do talk about defensive tackle a lot, but that is a major question going forward. We've also had some additions when it comes into not only the analyst side of the defense, but also we've got Nansen, we've got a few additions there. When you're talking about the marriage for kind of the standard fan, when you're talking about the marriage of scheme, you're talking about what the defensive line is doing, what the linebackers are doing, and what the secondary is doing, Paul. So what are you looking for specifically with these new coaches, with these new schemes to help unify those particular position groups?
I mean, you just have to know what you're doing, and you have to be coherent. You have to play as a group, right? It's not just about you might want to mute yourself, Ian. There you go. He's got to put the sunglasses back on, and everything will be fine. I mean, look, that's a broad question, so we have done deep dives on it. We'll probably do more as the season progresses, but everyone has to do their job, and then you have to have some basic understanding of basic first principles of football. Like, I don't care what the coverage is. I can't let a receiver run across my face while I stand there squatting and I'm the safety. I mean, Keaton Crawford against Kansas let a receiver run right past him, and he never moved. You're the safety. You're the last line of defense. If you understand basic football principles, it doesn't even matter what the call is. That's your guy. Turn and run with him. So some of it's as basic as that. Some of it's getting the linebackers to understand what their responsibility is within the zone when we're running sort of man under, stuff like that. But the main thing is you've got to marry those things. And I think, frankly, the reason we didn't try some different things, which you would have thought we would have tried last year against certain matchups, like say Washington, is if you're not confident you can marry up the back end to trying new stuff up front, then you're not going to try new stuff. You're just going to roll out your base defense and try to play. And we can't really do that anymore. Like, that's not where college football is or where it's going. You need to game plan. And if a team has an extreme offense, whether run heavy or pass heavy, or the way they do it, you have to make modifications to your defense. And that's part of the reason I think Johnny Nansen is here. I think people thought first and foremost he's here as a recruiter. He is a good recruiter. I actually think he's here as an idea guy. And I think he's here to help Texas get a little more sophisticated in their week-to-week game planning. And I think the addition of some of the analysts recently are also testament to that fact.
We talked earlier about Greg Sankey noting that real estate agents are the leaders of tomorrow. And we want to talk about one of them. Hi, guys. It's me, LC. We're not it. We want to talk about one of our favorite real estate agents, and that is our very own Laura Baker. If you're looking to buy a home or sell a house in the Central Texas area, reach out to Laura. She is part of the family. She's Inside Texas member, avid Longhorn fan, and a UT grad. So please reach out to her. She was with Keller Williams, an elite member of the Andy Allen team over there at Keller Williams. Her number is 512-784-0505. And again, that number is 512-784-0505. Please, please, please reach out to Laura. She's been excellent. She's helped our own Ian Boyd and has been a great contributor to everything at Inside Texas, and we really do appreciate her help with everything. We have lost Ian. Ian, I wanted to keep his frozen face up there as long as I could, but unfortunately we could not. We have moved, so there's been a rule change, and I'm curious to see both Paul and Eric here if you think that this is significant in any way whatsoever, or how much it might change the game in terms of how it's coached in game, and that is the addition of what the NFL has by way of having tablets on the sideline. They're going to get the opportunity to do some instant reviews with some things, have the tablets there, the iPads, as Sankey pointed out. Is that type of in-game, what kind of difference is that going to make, or do you see it making any difference at all? We'll start with you, Eric.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get real feedback on that in the first couple of games and see how it actually works. You know, I'm always worried about paralysis by analysis, overloading them with too much thinking. That's a potential pitfall, but you can also correct something on the fly too. It's probably going to be player specific. I think they got a much higher IQ team this year. That's testament to some of the additions they made specifically in the secondary, but even the experience on the front, I think is going to help out. Hearing good things about those guys, knowing where to be in run fits and all that. I think it's going to be able to clean up things on the fly. Again, Johnny Nansen probably going to be have a big hand in that. He's the main guy that's operating their run fits during the off season. So I can see him. I can see them benefiting from that. But I'll wait for a game or two and get real intel and see how it's benefiting them or potentially hurting them in some cases.
Any thoughts on that, Paul? I do agree. The idea that sometimes we just hit these kids with too much information, and the whole premise seems to be learn as much as you can and then just go. What are your thoughts on the analysis that we're going to have with those iPads on the sideline?
I think it's marginal. I think it's probably actually a marketing partnership more than anything. Okay. You always had stills, still photos, things like that. And as Eric said, I think you can actually overwhelm guys. I mean, the key is up in the booth. You want to communicate, hey, they were in this. And you can tell them or show them. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's not going to make a huge difference. The big difference in rule changes that I think are going to affect things is direct helmet communication. And then, of course, we have a 2-minute warning now in college football. So you're adding a timeout. And that's a big deal. And so end of half, end of game management, we're going to see more and more college football coaches completely blow it. It's going to be hilarious because
Mario Cristobal.
I mean, they're not very good. Yeah, Mario Cristobal leaps to mind. They're not very good at some of this stuff right now, and you just add another element of that, and it's going to be hilarious. I mean, you're going to see guys completely screwing that up. And also, you have to understand, as an offense, if you get the ball with 2.5 minutes left in the game, you actually need to be thinking about burning clock while you're trying to go score. because with that 2-minute warning and with the delays and things like that, and just how timeouts work, and also the fact in college football you can still stop the clock in varying ways. That's a lot of time, and you've got to be cognizant of it. And I think both play callers on both sides need to be aware of it. There's this thing in college football. Tom Herman used to drive me freaking nuts with this, where he thought 2.5 minutes was like, I can run out the clock. I'm going to run the ball into the line 3 times and punt. And it's like, okay, now there's 1:56 on the clock, Tom. Nice job. So yeah, I think the coaches are going to have another little thing to think about, and it's going to overwhelm some people. So I cannot wait to watch rocket scientists Mario Cristobal and Billy Napier going head to head in the opener, Miami, Florida. We've got the 2-minute clock. We've got helmet communications. We've got, tablets on the sideline. I think it's going to be awesome.
We are getting some questions in, and we appreciate your questions. Please throw those at us. We love staying on the defensive line side of things. So let's just go throw this over to On the Porch, who's asking specifically more about the edges of those people on the line. So this is to Eric. We're going to put that out there. What are you hearing about the edges behind the scenes? I think that's really more of a development question. What are you hearing? I mean, roster wise, it seems to be a strength.
Yeah, it's viewed as a strength. We don't hear quite as much about the big boys during the summer workouts. It's mainly our information is driven by 7-on-7. You can get a better idea what those guys are doing going up against each other. But yeah, I mean, it's viewed as a team strength. They love the younger guys in the group that we haven't quite seen. I mean, everybody's sky high on Colton Vasek. He gets talked about as much as Colin Simmons. You got Barron Sorrell. I think this guy's name reminds me of Barron, of course. He probably would have been the 4th person to go to SEC Media Days if they were allowed to take 4. He's the leader in that room. Really one of the undisputed leaders of the defense. A lot of maturity, always had a maturity to him and work ethic. You got Ethan Burt, who's going to be a year better. Trey Moore, everybody raves about Trey Moore, how just a complete football player he is. Obviously, he lacks a little bit of length, but he's got a lot of compensatory traits. And then you got Colin Simmons. And Colin Simmons up to 245 now. I know there was some, again, this ties back to what Paul was saying about, Jordan Washington, but, he was always going to put on weight rather quickly. He's up to about 245. That's really right in line with where he wants to be. You don't need to get him any bigger than that as long as he can hold up against the run. So it's going to be a strength, man. I'm curious to see how the rotation shakes out. We'll learn a lot more about that in August. But yeah, that's going to help out the pass rush is going to help out the defensive back quite a bit this year.
Sticking with one Rick question. I know you're not really sure about that rotation, but that's a position that obviously, especially on the D line, freshness is massively important. And one of the things I think the takeaway is from what you were just describing is that depth. I mean, this is an opportunity for them to really roll people out and create some havoc. So it's a really great thing. So we do have a question here from Roger G, and this is there's nothing to despair, Roger. I love this type of question, but this is the, in it to the whistle question. And this has to do with the recruits that we may not necessarily have in the fold at the moment. So the question is, Eric, who are some of the 2025 recruits that Texas missed out on, but we could be seeing making it to campus for a game, especially maybe that Georgia game? And he's referring specifically to Zion, Sharma, and Brew. Are any of it's, again, this is you recruit to the whistle, but What are you hearing about maybe those 3 specifically?
Well, Zion, we all knew he was going to pick LSU, and he wanted to make sure that it was okay with Texas if he could still use his official visit during the fall, even if he committed to LSU. They said, of course, he had a little drama behind the scenes, and we understand why he committed when he did. But Texas is going to stay on him. Obviously, he's a high priority. I could see him taking an official visit, and that Georgia game has been mentioned. Obviously, LSU is going to try to shut that down. The other one that really jumps out to me would be Riley Pettijohn, the linebacker committed to Ohio State. That was really Texas had a come-from-behind loss there. They had no business losing that one. I think fences can be mended, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up on campus at some point this fall. Those are the 2. Myron Charles committed to Florida State the same day as Sharma committed to Oregon. That's another one. I think that Texas is right in the thick of it. I kind of view him as being uncommitted to begin with. Those Oregon guys, it's tough for me to see them. They might have to sacrifice a lot to decommit from Oregon. So I'm not too sure about those guys right now. But we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of recruiting left. Obviously, they were in a good spot with Sharma and Brew. I'm not going to rule anything out. I think Texas is going to have a pretty busy fall with recruiting, more so than the past 2 cycles. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of developments. There's a couple guys that are communicating with Texas that people don't even know about that are very, very talented. There's going to be some interesting developments in the fall for sure.
Paul, we do have a question here about just NIL in general, specifically to do with some of the unifying factors of that with small schools and big schools. And I want to take that to you. But before I do, this is again, just because it's our favorite subject, let's talk a little bit more about D-line. What are you hearing behind the scenes? And just in terms of the expectations, I mean, is the room pretty positive? Are they, because again, I know we lost some NFL talent there, but it's not as if we've just completely gone off the map and everything is terrible. We still have some talent there. What are you hearing by way of expectations behind the scenes, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, they think they're going to have dominant edge play. Like last year, they thought they were going to have dominant defensive tackle play. I had a source in August tell me that they thought they had the best defensive line in the country, which, I didn't even report because I didn't feel comfortable about raising those expectations. And it turned out that they had the best defensive tackles in the country. Obviously, the edges weren't the best, but they weren't terrible. This year, they feel like edge is going to be a team strength, and they're not worried about defensive tackles. They just think that there's going to be a step back, but they're not concerned. They like what they've got. Alfred Collins, they think, is going to have a very big year. They like Vernon Broughton. Bill Norton, Jermaine Lole bring a lot of experience and some size and some, there's going to be a lot of stalemates. It's not always going to be pretty. There's going to be a lot of little car accidents in the middle of the field, but that's perfectly fine. They're not going to be a bunch of sexy stat stuffing plays in the backfield outside of Collins and Broughton, I don't think. But I think the defensive tackle has been overblown just because of, what they did lose. And then the edges, I think, are going to be a team strength.
Yeah. We've got 10 guys who could legitimately play at 4 positions, right? So you have 5 guys on edge that we're all looking forward to play. We've got 5 guys at defensive tackle that we think can go out there and play. I think the goal probably at defensive tackle is to be above average to good in aggregate. And I think the goal at edge is to be good to excellent in aggregate. And I think the challenge and the interesting thing will be balancing, how are you going to get Trey Moore out on the field? I don't want him to just be part of a rotation with Ethan Burke or Barron Sorrell. You've got to find creative ways to get him on the field in addition to those guys, specifically on passing downs or even against passing biased teams who we realize early can't really run the ball on us. Like, let's get as many pass rushers, let's get as many cheetahs out there on the field as possible. The other thing is I wouldn't sleep on Vosick. I think he's being forgotten a little bit, but in terms of just pure talent, he's got some skills that are really subtle that are rare. When you're 6'5", and you can get really low and still anchor and be powerful, you have that bend, you have that level change. It's a really rare attribute because most 6'5", 6'6" edges, they lose some leverage battles from time to time. That's why it's so important they use their hands and they get their wingspan and they lock guys out, because once someone gets into them, they're at a disadvantage. They're cut higher, right? It's just physics. But Vosick can get low, like he can anchor down. Like he's a guy you could put in short yardage and he's going to burrow in and make a play. And even though he's 260. So I would not sell that guy short. Ethan Burke is obviously going to improve. And Sorrell, he has methodically gotten better every single year at Texas. So why wouldn't he get better again this year?
One of the things Greg Sankey talked about was the idea of creating some sort of national guidelines or national rules for NIL. So the players aren't dealing with different rules and regulations depending on where they're being recruited. And what Christian is asking is a question that I think everybody in college football is trying to figure out. And that is, what do you do with the haves and the have-nots, right? With the current NIL structure, do schools in smaller states, I think what he is probably referring there is maybe smaller revenue schools with fewer big donors like LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, that obviously have a lot of donors, do they eventually lose their ability to keep up with the UTs, the A&Ms, and the Ohio States without any sort of regulation going into place?
Alabama's been donor funded for a very long time. They know how to work the system. If you look at their current class, I think they have 4 or 5 5-stars. Got 2 5-stars in the last week. Clearly, they're not hurting for NIL. We've mentioned it a million times that in the absence of the discount that they got with Nick Saban, a lot of people are stepping up to ensure that Kalen DeBoer gets a fair shot to keep the dynasty rolling. I don't think a school like Alabama, with its prestige and tradition, is in any danger of losing out on NIL just because they might not have nearly as many donors. What they lack in amount of donors, they make up for in enthusiasm. Ole Miss, we've seen them have a number of cycles where they kind of came out of nowhere and clearly had a big wallet. Just this past cycle in the portal, and going back to Hugh Freeze, obviously they were doing whatever it took. I'm pretty sure Alabama reported Ole Miss for their pre-NIL. But again, UT, A&M, and Ohio State, they are going to have an advantage with the amount of donors they have. Texas was flexing that and probably will again throughout the rest of this cycle. But here's what NIL is about to change. NIL is about to change. This is going to be the last year that I think Texas is driven by an outside collective. And so I'm not sure exactly what the downhill effects of that are going to be. There's going to be a lot to figure out on the fly. We're going to have to learn how it does operate internally. So NIL as we know it is going to change pretty drastically for Texas in the next year.
One of the points of this question too, Paul, was the idea of what do the smaller schools do? I mean, how, because I think the fear here is you start becoming such a focused group of schools that we start losing out on other opportunities for people to have places to play because they don't necessarily have the money to stay in it. It's generally not a revenue sport for the majority of schools. Obviously, the schools listed in this question are making a ton of money, but there's a lot of schools out there that aren't. And I know this is going to change, and I think Eric pointed that out, but what would you say the challenge is for them? Or do you see that going by the wayside if there aren't major changes to accommodate for smaller schools? Do you see a salary cap? What are some of the options there for those?
So the key to the question was the predicate with the current NIL structure. And I think the current NIL structure is viewed as untenable long-term. So we could go to a salary cap. I mean, I don't know if they want to make players employees. That's opening up a can of worms. Good luck fielding a program in California. But
they don't want to. Texas is staunchly against that. They're fighting it. They've got a lot of political allies fighting it. Most of the schools are fighting that. But Paul brings up a good question. It's they're going to have to find some sort of bipartisan way to get that through. That's going to be that could be a third rail for negotiations. Paul's right to bring that up.
Yeah, and the other factor, I think by smaller schools, maybe he means poorer schools. Right?
I think so.
So poorer states. Hey, Oregon was sort of a nothing. All you need is one. All you need is one super motivated alum.
Your
right?
T-Bone Pickens of the world, yeah.
Yeah, T-Boone Pickens. You keep saying T-Bone. It's cracking me up. It's awesome.
Well, it is T-Bone Pickens when you go to school in Oklahoma.
All right, that's a good point.
We got a question here, and we talked a little bit about this. So I want to go to this aspect of it, Paul, because you brought something up we were talking about cohesion of defense, right? And obviously everybody being aligned, being in the right place. This goes to Ant Hill, right? Anthony Hill, it's an amazing athlete. He's probably, if not certainly, moving to the middle linebacker position, which is a very heady position. Well, he'll no doubt be able to compensate for some of those mental learning curves with his athleticism. But do we have any news? We'll start with you, Eric, on this, and then I would like for Paul to maybe highlight some of the importance of Ant's development through this and how it's going to help with the alignment of the defense. So, Eric, have you heard anything behind the scenes on how Ant is doing?
Yeah, I mean, he's been doing great since the day he got to Texas. I think the only concerns we hear now are just, can he step up and be the leader in that room that they want him to be? Obviously, he's got David Benda right there by his side helping as well. But I mean, as far as understanding what to do, he knows the defense. Athletically, he's above and beyond what you need at the position. He's a guided missile when he sees the ball. He's just a natural football player. There are no concerns about how he's going to perform this season.
What is in terms of his performance, do we have any concerns about the mental aspect of it? He's obviously a smart player, but that is a very heady position. And this is a first-year player in that position. Is there anything that you would be concerned about there, Paul?
For him particularly, no. I mean, he's actually shown a great learning curve. Everything they've thrown at him, he's absorbed and progressed and gotten better at. There was one particular run fit early in the season, people might recall, against Wyoming.
Nope.
where he blew it and he learned from that. That they busted a long run on it and scored, and it was effectively on him. So the interesting thing about off the ball linebacker, traditional linebacker, particularly on the interior, is it's a weird combo of X's and O's knowledge and knowing rules, but also instincts, because you kind of have to know when to break the rules when you see the opportunity to make a play. When is it okay to run under a block, meaning the play's going a certain direction, the offensive lineman's blocking at an angle, trying to cut you off. When can you just run under that guy because you're a better, quicker, more explosive athlete, and then sprint to the backfield and grab the running back for a 3-yard loss before the play even gets started? Because if you do that at the incorrect time, you've just you've effectively blocked yourself and taken yourself out of the play, right? If you don't time it right. And then there's other times where they run inside zone or duo, and you got to take the block on, you got to take the guard on with the correct shoulder, you got to shed him, and you got to push him back into the hole. And then you've got to run, you've got to pursue, you've got coverage obligations and duties, particularly at the RPO game, which he's going to see over and over. So there's a lot. You can get really overwhelmed as a young player. But every indication about Anthony Hill is he takes football really seriously. Like, he wants to do this as his profession. He wants to do this as his trade. You watch the movie 300, and they have the famous scene where they meet the Thebans on the way to the battle, and they say, "What's your profession?" And the guy says, "I'm a blacksmith." And he says, "What's your profession?" And he says, "Oh, I'm a potter." And then he asks the Spartans, "What's your profession?" And they all hit their shields. And the idea is, we don't practice any trades but war. That's what we do. That's our profession. That's what we have our slaves for. So that's kind of how Anthony Hill feels. I think he wants to play professional football, and I think he wants to play as quickly as possible. And I think this is a dude that's in film study in his playbook, and like, he's not just out there like, "Man, I'm just an athlete, I'll make it work."
Right.
I think he takes it pretty seriously.
He's not Harold Perkins like we were talking about earlier. And, I always get the lay of the land when these guys get on campus. How hard is the guy working? Is he driven? Is he coachable? Everything was early returns on him. We're like Malik Muhammad or Arch Manning. It's all the same. Like, this guy gets after it. Lots of film study. He's driven it. It's a football 24/7 for him.
Sticking with, but just focusing on one player. And I know this is a very general question, but any updates, or how's Bledsoe?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything new on him. I'm going to need August to know. The light bulb's going to come on at some point. We're not sure when it is. Hopefully it's this August. It could come on at any moment for him. He's got plenty of time in the program by now. Ask me on August 15th what I'm hearing about Jure Bledsoe.
We talked a little bit about the secondary, and so again, we can go back to that a little bit. But I really want to hear about. Let's move over a little bit and talk about Trevor Goosby. What are we looking at for the offseason for him? Are the backup tackles being groomed? Where do you feel about the offense? How do you feel about the offensive line and their development this offseason?
Goosby's another one. And, with his dad here, you guys obviously did a great job with him. He's another one. He didn't come in as an early enrollee. He was the only offensive lineman, I think, in that class that didn't come in early. And I think that bothered him, but he clearly worked his tail off because he's been ready the second he got on campus. Very hard worker in the gym. He's one of the few guys that I hear about all the time, along with Barron Sorrell. So it's interesting. I got, there was a Sorrell in here earlier asking about Barron, and here we have Goosby asking about Goosby. Very hard worker. He's put on a lot of weight. Still needs to add a little bit more. Last I checked, I'm not sure what his official weight is now. But last I heard, he needed to still gain a little bit of weight. But he seems the heir apparent to Kelvin Banks, and honestly, he seemed that way a year ago. He's just continued to develop. I think he's probably going to be left tackle. Brandon Baker's probably going to be the heir apparent at right tackle. Maybe that flip-flops over time. I'm not sure. But Goosby's going to play a lot of football for Texas, and the parents obviously instilled a very good work ethic in him because, again, he's one of the 3 or 4 guys I hear about all the time when it comes to off-season workouts and getting after it.
So I watched him in the spring game, and he's got a lot of tools. He's going to be good. He's 6'7", probably 310, 315. With like a flat belly. So he's going to continue to remake his body. He's going to play his ball at 325, 330 and still keep his feet. He plays hard. He went against really good edges in that spring game and held his own. So I think the interesting thing to look for him is, God forbid, I don't want to wish this into existence by saying it, but if you have an injury or someone needs to come out during a game at tackle, the interesting thing will be, does Gooseby go in as the swing tackle, the third guy, or does Hayden Connor kick out and then they put in Nato? Yeah, Nato Umeozulu at guard, right? So that'll be interesting to see. If Gooseby's that third tackle, that tells you a huge amount of stuff about his progress and how they project him for 2025.
Lastly, let's just go back to this, because I think we talk a lot about this particular episode has been a lot about just the alignment. How are we going to get all phases of the defensive line, specifically with the secondary? And this is I'm just going to ask you this question here: is do you see us being better this season than we were last season, or do you see this as a step back? Or hopefully, I mean, worst, maybe a good case scenario is it's a push, it's a neutral position. We'll start with you, Eric. What do you think, that we're going to be an improved secondary this year?
Yeah, and I take a little bit of umbrage with the word "finally" there. That secondary 2 years ago was good. Anthony Cook back there at safety, Jahdae Barron, of course, at nickel. Deshaun James just played good at corner for most of the year. That was a good secondary. So obviously they had Gary Patterson that season, so that's something to keep an eye out for. I do think they're going to be better this year. They've raised the IQ of that room tremendously. All the guys that busted last year are no longer in the program. The guys that tend to not have any busts are still in the program. And for everybody that's always worried about busts, you should be the big Michael Taps fans, because he's the steadying force back there. But now Andrew Makuba is said to be very comfortable within the defense, natural, understands the playbook very well for being there for such a brief time. I just thought, Javian Cole's a pretty heady player. Gavin Holmes has stepped up a lot. We should have discussed him more in the spring. In May, I started hearing all these good things about him that I should have been picking up during spring ball. So they're high on him. Malik Muhammad is about as high IQ football player as you're going to find. Jahdae Barron, of course, known for his high IQ. So I'm not putting any. I don't think the bust will come from the players. You do wonder if the schemes are matched up. That's been the concern since Sark was hired. When he hired his other coaches before his defensive coordinator, I think that's been something we've been keeping an eye on. But I think the pieces are in place to have a very good secondary.
Anything to add there, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Makuba started 31 games for Clemson.
Right.
And that's a huge asset. Jahdae Barron is a grizzled veteran. He's back healthy, which is huge. He's also up to he's up to 200 pounds. So if you thought he was playing the edge well last season and the season before, I think you're going to see something even more impressive. He's just added 10 pounds of armor to his body. Taft doesn't make mistakes. If you look at Taft's snaps last year, did they go up or go down as the season progressed?
They went up.
They went up. He had the most snaps of any safety in the last 6, 7, 8 games that Texas played. Why? Because he doesn't bust. He doesn't make mistakes. Fans tend to really overemphasize the 6'1", 200-pound dude with a six-pack who looks amazing and tests amazing, and he busts plays, and they're like, yeah, but he's so fast. He's so athletic. It's like, if you bust a play, you're useless. You might as well not have been out on the field. A 60-yard touchdown pass is the bane of a defense. So, most college offenses can't go 80 yards in 14 plays. So when you allow single play scores, you're worse than help. You're not helpful in any way. And the quicker you got to get, early on, you're going to have guys do that because that's part of the progress. But if you have third year, fourth year players still busting, still don't really understand the concepts, still don't understand the coverage you're calling, still don't have this natural instincts for football of understanding the bigger principle. I don't care what the call is. I can't let this guy run past me. I can't just stand there squatting, staring at the quarterback. You have to get those guys out of your program, and you've got to let other guys play. You can't just keep waiting for the light to turn on, because if it never turns on, you're going to end up getting fired if you're a coach.
The most athletic DB on the team last year was Keaton Crawford.
Yes.
I think one thing that, again, people overemphasize about speed is really fast players can get into the wrong position quicker.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the challenges with youth, inexperience, and a lot of speed. We want to thank you guys for checking in with us today. Sorry for the late start. That's 100% my fault. I will take ownership of all of that. Your questions were great. Please, you're going to check in. We've got another live on Wednesday, Texas takes the podium on Wednesday for media days, their first media days in the SEC. Please check out InsideTexas.com. If you sign up and use the promo code IT1, that'll give you 2 months, which again, that's going to get you into the season. That's a heavy chunk of really great reporting that's going to be happening during that period of time. And we really invite you to join us in the fold. Until next time, thanks so much.